I'm Anne McLean from the library's music division. My colleague on the end, David Plylar, and I are delighted to be welcoming you tonight for a remarkable evening of chamber works by the Pulitzer Prize-winning composer, performer, and visual artist Raven Chacon. We're very excited about hearing the world premiere tonight of his new Library of Congress commission from our Anne Edlum Hull and William Remsen Strickland Fund for American Music. And we're especially grateful to be presenting this work in the context of the America 250 celebration. In our program tonight, you can read a growing list of accolades for Raven's compositions. He's acclaimed for poetic, multidisciplinary works that are deeply thoughtful, evocative, and provocative across the domains of classical and avant-garde music and a much wider cultural cosmos. His art and his installations are part of the collections at major museums like the Whitney, the Swiss Institute, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, and the Smithsonian Institution. So Raven, you brought together a formidable group of collaborators tonight. They're known for totally standout performances in many different ways. And actually, I believe everyone sitting here is a composer. They all have been collaborators in a lot of the works that you'll hear tonight. And I wanted to introduce them. Gelsey Bell to Raven's left, from thingNY, an ensemble, and your opera is part of the Prototypes series this spring, which is so cool, coming up, and that's next week, right?
No, it was part of a prototype festival several years ago.
And then I also you have a number. You're also with Verispeed, the ensemble Verispeed, and Olivia Shortt is again multi-instrumentalist, storyteller, performance artist, and one of the works on tonight's program is written for you. So that's another thing to talk about. There are just so many interesting things. David and I were saying earlier, maybe it'd be great to just jump into talking about how the commission came about and thinking about landscape. Your work is so infused with concepts of landscape and space and spirit, place. And I was thinking about the library as really a kind of a landscape, a cultural landscape of its own. And when you came here, I'd love to hear your reactions and thinking about how you thought about building this composition in your mind.
Yeah. Landscape is one of those words that always gets applied to my work, usually because people don't know what else to say about it. But I know what Anne's interpretation of landscape is here, and I love it because it is what I'm dealing with in a lot of this work. But yeah, to even back up, world premiere implies that this will happen again, and this won't happen again. This is a one-time thing. I got to use the flutes. I get to play the bukla, Morton Subotnick's bukla. I don't know if I'll get to do that again. So this is probably a world premiere, but also the last show. So you all get to hear this. But world premiere also implies that it's going to be the same somewhat the next time I do it, if I get to do it. And that's not going to happen either. You know, sometimes these compositions are in this gray area. They're not ever improvisations, but they are, there's a prompt, there's a plan, there's a landscape that then gets enacted in some way. And, dealing with or working with the flutes that I had access to, big shout out to Carol Lynn Bamford, the curator of musical instruments, for helping me, navigate all of the amazing things that are in the vault. And I'll tell you what the piece is. The piece was having access to Native American flutes, which, I suppose they wanted the Native American composer to have access to them. But I was more interested in the Civil War fifes. I was composing an opera a couple of years ago about January 6th for the Venice Biennale. It didn't happen for a lot of reasons, but I feel like this is a continuation of that, of that work, of thinking through the history of this country. And so I wanted the Civil War fives and the James Madison glass flute and the Native American flutes to all collide inside of the circuitry of the bukla. And that's what the piece is. And so I was able to work with those sounds, record them, and I'll play them back, running through my former teacher Morton Subotnick's instrument. And so, yeah, I guess there's also this landscape of time too, of having this instrument that was built in the 60s, mediating these old conflicts and trying to make sense of them here in 2026. So that's the solo I'll do at the end of the evening, but I've written all these other pieces and have been in an ongoing collaboration with this amazing ensemble, thingNY, based in New York City. And I had also written these pieces called For Zikalasha, who Zikalasha was a Native American woman from the Dakota people. And she was a poet, a writer of political works, a writer of poetry, a writer of prose, and was also a composer. And I had written 12 graphic notation scores for contemporary women composers, activists, educators. And thingNY will be performing those pieces tonight as well. One of those pieces was written for Olivia, and Olivia has also been having this ongoing collaboration with thingNY. And then there's some other works, some older works of mine on the program. I didn't even realize till today, kind of. But those will be cool. And then I think at the end of the thingNY set will be this piece I co-wrote with Pulitzer-winning poet, Mojave poet, Natalie Diaz. And we were invited to write a new work for the Perlman Arts Center that opened up in New York City a couple of years ago. And so we wrote this piece. It was another one of these prompts like America 250 of like inclusivity, diversity, all the keywords. And so we wanted to write about this, I mean, it's nice to have an opportunity for that input. So we wrote this piece, Wave Upon Wave, about this this diaspora, this migration, these ideas of being from this land, but also trapped inside of this country. All of that is inside of Natalie's words. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you all for coming. Pass it on.
I before we get into the thingNY set, because there's so much I had the privilege to be able to witness the rehearsals, and it was very fascinating to see how things evolved and just changed over the course of the past 2 days. And so I feel very lucky to have been a part of that, just in the background. With one comment that you made about your commission, that I wonder if you could expand on a little bit, as you mentioned your teacher Mort Subotnick, and by the time that you studied with him, I believe this particular the modular synthesizer was out of his possession, right? So was it something that you'd had previous experience with, or was it something that you thought this is like an opportunity to have like an analog interaction with your older teacher? Or I'm just curious how that played into things.
Yeah, Mort was one of my teachers, but I didn't learn anything about the Buchla till I came to the library and worked with Carol, and even today working with Mark. Where's Mark at? Who's helped rebuild the instrument. I learned more in the past today than I did from Morton Subotnick. But no, it's just so cool that I studied with him a bit, and his instrument is here, and that instrument is legendary. It was used on a recording, Silver Apples of the Moon, which is probably one of these recordings that gave access to the larger mainstream about this kind of experimental electronic music and synths. And so to be able to play that tonight is absolutely beautiful. I wanted to talk too about this other instrument I'll be playing tonight. I couldn't bring any of the flutes from the vault out tonight, but except for one, because it's made of steel, and it's a Potawatomi flute made in the late 1800s that was made from the barrel of a rifle, and it has a little bear on the top as the what's that called, the the fetish, but also what is it? It does something music like tonally to this. It keeps it in tune, right? I don't know anything about flutes. What is it called? The yeah. There's a little bear. So I don't know if they were hunting bears with this rifle or they were hunting people. But that'll be played through the book.
Was that one that was associated with the military?
I don't know. Do we know, Carol?
It's likely it was made probably at the turn of the century, and here are maker's marks on it that seem to be from the United States. Oh, yeah. It was newly made when it was acquired by the flute collector Dayton C. Miller. You see some of his flutes in here, and there's a picture of him right back here as well. And he amassed the world's largest collection of flutes, but it includes this flute that you're going to hear tonight. And Miller was a specialist with guns, and so he knew when he saw it that it had been recently made, but from an older a gun, but there are a mark on it. So, and you can see where it was filed down and everything. But
So one last question about the booklet. What exactly is it? Is it? I know that's a trick question.
It's a modular synthesizer, a bunch of circuits, but it has the capability of patching all these different circuits together. So you can, it can filter sound, it can modulate the sound, it can add noise, it can sequence, the sound that's running through it into different effects. It can probably do a whole lot of other things I don't know about. I'm sure a Buchla expert would be like, oh, this is a simple patch you've set up. And really, I just, patched from the tutorial, and Mark helped me today also figure out some things. But I have my own sound too that I've been working with for a long time that uses mixers and cassette tapes and guitar pedals to make this kind of noisy kind of music. And so the Buchla, it was trying to maybe apply my sound to get it to work through the Buchla. So that was fun. I mean, for me, that's a prompt, and to be able to use these flutes. I should give a disclaimer too. I'm Dene from the Navajo Nation, and we don't really have a tradition of flutes. We use whistles and ceremonies sometimes, but we're not flute people, and there's other tribes that use the flute and have developed a flute, making process and probably a lot of songs for flute, but that's not where I come from. So, in a way, I'm working with materials I don't really know about. I learned by coming here to the library and turned it into something that I think, makes sense to me.
Speaking of the whistles, this is something that you are employing tonight in the first piece, or one of the pieces, dog whistles, or that's a different type. I know you've worked with bird call gadgets, things, and so forth. But maybe you have a question.
Oh, well, I mean, I just wanted to pick up on something you just said that is related to that piece that with the whistles. But you said that there's an element of almost of learning as you're performing, and I've noticed in a number of your pieces there's a sort of didactic component where through the act of performing, one gains a certain mastery or whatever, and then other people can join, and there's like the structure is kind of guided by this participation, like where there's that learning process. And it seems is that a fair thing to say, that that's a part of a lot of your music, or is just some of it? Or
yeah, it's a pedagogical, right? There's a pedagogical component to these pieces, in the sense that the process of enacting them means that you're learning sound in real time, or you're learning the music in real time. So again, they're not quite improvisations. I mean, a very simple definition of improvisation, or maybe somebody who might an assumption could be you're just going up there and doing whatever you want, like random sounds or just whatever you want, and that happens. That does happen. But these pieces are again, they're prompts to say, Gelsey's going to start playing something, and then maybe Olivia listens to that and joins, and then David joins next, and Anne joins next as well. And that's the piece, it's this kind of like process that happens throughout it. And this work that they're going to play tonight, Whistle Quartet, it's for dog whistles, and the score just looks like this drawing I made of these lines, and the lines are the shape of the melody. But there's no melody with dog whistles because you're not supposed to hear dog whistles. So pitch equates to breath, strength, and volume. All of it is the same line, the same information.
This is so fascinating. My takeaway from one thing you also said earlier was that you maybe didn't have a foreknowledge of everything that thingNY was putting together tonight. And from the perspective of, I mean, I'm not going to give anything away, but there's such variety in the choices that you've made of the types of pieces, different instrumentation, a part of which is built into the compositions themselves to have that variability. But how did you, as an ensemble, kind of come up with both the choices of the pieces and then how they were configured? Did you try different configurations, or did you just know that this was the right way to do it? Or
Yeah. When we first started talking about this, there were a number of pieces that we looked at of Raven's work, and knowing who the members who were going to play were, different people were just attracted to different pieces. And then there were times where it's like, oh, I think you'll do a great job with this one. How do you look at the score? So there was a bit of that. And then I think with the ensemble pieces, it was partly just about the social dynamics in the group. And there's also this feeling that it could be this 4 people in the group, or it could be a totally different members. So, yeah.
well, I mean, okay. So just to mention one piece in particular, and I'm also curious about how this is notated, just from a dramatic standpoint. There's the piece for 2 drums and a solo singer, and it's extremely compelling, and a lot of the attacks are kind of dictated by the distance between the drums, and the use of space is so clearly, at least it seems to me, like an essential part of the piece. And that use of space, say with the whistle quartet, is also an important part of the piece, as we'll find when we listen to it. How is that sort of thing indicated to the performers? And is it something that you just experiment with depending on the space that you're in, or how does that work? Or is there a general way to say that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, if I remember correctly, with Whistle Quartet, the spatialization we're doing is not indicated in the score. But when we were rehearsing it in the studio, we found that it sounded really wonderful with people spread out, and just what it was doing acoustically, which of course is in the score, was supported by the staging that we'll do tonight, where we're spread around the space. So I think sometimes, thingNY is very much a group that likes to think about unusual stagings and likes to think about how the sound interacts with the space, which also means when we're going to do this program in 2 days in New York City in a gallery space, and the staging will probably be pretty different depending on how it interacts with that space. So every new space we go into, we're paying attention to that relationship. I don't know if you have thoughts, Raven, about the voice and drum solo or anything like that.
Yeah, just to say that, I mean, as musicians, we're constantly adapting both to interpretations of scores and our own personal ways of performing music, but also another parameter of that is when you find yourself in the hall, seeing what works. So of course, this hall is very live. It sounds beautiful in there, and so I think thingNY, got in there, and we already have some other pieces that are about reflection, about sound reflecting and being directionalized. So I think this piece, when they were working with the whistle quartet, they realized, yeah, that we should also extend this out into the audience. So just to say, when you go in there tonight, I think only about, well, there's 2 or 3 or 4 pieces that extend either sonically or physically out into the audience where you'll be. So that everything's not just stuck on the stage, it's not like a regular, I'm not gonna say regular, but like a classical thing.
Thinking about the scores, this is something that I was going to say. If you haven't, if you're not familiar with Raven's scores as works of art too, check out his website, Spiderwebs in the Sky, which is remarkable. We made a PowerPoint tonight to show a few of them, but the PowerPoint didn't quite work. But you can see a number of them on there. And I know score-based creation is a huge element in your work, and you go across dimensions and disciplines this way. But I was thinking, since we have 4 composers sitting here, how do you each work with scores? I would be interested to hear how do you create your scores?
Yeah, I'll talk briefly about that. The score. So tonight, there's a couple works that are just text. There's a piece called Whisper Trio. It's only text. The text is the instructions to how to play the piece, but translated into Navajo phonetically. And that is also the content of the piece. You're reading the instructions of the work, but you don't realize it until you look at page 2 and when you see the English translation, that's what it's telling you to do. The point is not to become fluent in Navajo by the end of the piece. It's not one of those pedagogical pieces. The reason you're whispering is because you're at least trying to do it. And there's 3 of you to do it at the same time. It's easy. It's easier, right? If you're not the only student in class and there's 3 of you struggling with it. The Zikalisha scores are graphic notation works. When I make graphic notation works, they're not meant to be these expressionistic symbols or drawings and, a spiral and just give it to somebody and say, play this. They're always accompanied by some kind of text, specific instructions of what that spiral means, not just musically, but also other meanings, other ascensions and descensions and emergences, other kinds of pathways, maps. Scores can be maps. And so these Zikalisha scores are meant to be biographies of these colleagues and friends and heroes of mine through the graphic notation, but also the text, what the text is prompting you to do. So in a way, they're very narrative and biographical at the same time. The piece Wave Upon Wave, it looks just like classical notation. It has quarter notes and eighth notes and key signature. I don't know if there's a key signature, but there's sharps and flats and all of that. It's not improvisational at all. It's all locked in. And then I haven't made a score yet for the bukla and flutes piece. I think I have. Do I have to? Yeah. Okay, I'll do it as part of the commission. It'll come. Yeah, it'll come someday, but I'm still thinking through what that will look like, or it might just be the charting of the patch, and trying to, I guess I should take some photos after the gig of what we did, but I'll redraw the bukla and put a stick figure there, draw some sound waves.
And Gelsey, your opera, which is so fascinating that you were saying you wrote 2 years ago, um, it, how tell us a little bit about the subject of the opera, about the 650 million years before humans leave the earth, and then how do you go about and there are no humans in the opera, right? And it's very timbre based and atmosphere based. How do you go about thinking about notating it and making a score?
Oh, sure. We're taking a little turn. So I've written this opera called Morning, and the basis of the opera, it was inspired by this book by Alan Weisman called The World Without Us. So it's telling the story of if humans disappeared right now, what would happen to environments, to other creatures, and it goes 1.6 billion years into the future. So we cover a lot of time. And in that opera, it's like the pieces we're doing of Ravens tonight. There's very standard musical notation. I actually play a boucle easel in it, so there are boucle patches. And there's also graphic notation and parts that are more structured improv. And I mean, I'm sure Raven feels the same way. I think part of what kind of score, there are so many different techniques for making scores, so that for me, I always start with the music, and then it can become really obvious what kind of score is needed. I feel like in the vocal solo of Ravens that I'm doing tonight, I would consider kind of the way to think about what I'm doing with the voice as gestural phrases. So it's not about these set rhythms or being in a meter. It's not about hitting certain pitches, but it is about capturing those gestures. And Raven's score is incredibly technical about how to approach that gesture. So even though it doesn't look like standard notation, as a performer, it still feels just as technical as standard notation would.
Just a quick note on that. I saw a person do a piece by, is it Georges Aperky? Is that there? Where was it a percussive piece where he was sitting on the edge of the stage doing incredible body percussion of all types and speaking in the complex poem at the same time. And I asked him afterwards, is it notated? He said, yes, every single thing, every gesture, every
Oh yeah, well, definitely with Apergy's music. I've done a bit of it. It is extremely scored out, all of it.
And what about you two as composers?
Sure. I'll kind of start maybe with a frame of reference into why I think I've really enjoyed working with Raven in the past and working on some of his music, because the way I think about my own scores, I started as a performer. So I studied like classical saxophone, and then I became an improviser. And then I was like, ooh, I want to make music. This is really fun. And I have this like very much like, my brain wants to like collage and like kind of gather baskets of ideas. And I think like we met in 2019, and we had all these conversations, and it was just so nice to not to think differently. Like, how do you speak about music? How do you disseminate information to a performer? How do you get them to understand what you're trying to do, but also give them the space for their interpretation in a way that feels really truthful to both of you? And so, like, my piece, I think, if you initially, like for Olivia Shortt, if you look at it in some ways without really reading the text, you know, it seems simple at first, but it, you know, there's a lot you're thinking about. And that one, I think one of the things I had said to you maybe in conversation, Raven, was like I was talking a bit about community and sort of people around me being really important. And this is like a thing I always hold with me, is like that you kind of held on to that in a way and made the score really about that, because like I don't want to give too much away, because there's something really special about whether or not the audience knows what I'm doing, but I am gathering information in a way to create my performance, and that feels really special to me. And so like I think about the same thing in my own work, where I'm like, how can I disseminate this in a way to work with theater artists? Or how could I do this to work with, you know, people who are musical but maybe don't read traditional Western music? Because I don't think that's always the right answer. And I'm really like, I love collaborating with people and figuring out different ways we can talk to each other and also to challenge myself. So that's a lot of what I think about, to be honest. Yeah.
I have another question for you, Olivia. Sure. So with the piece that was written for you, was this something that you worked with Raven? Was it a back and forth about it, or did the piece come to you and then there was a back and forth, or was it how did it go? What was that collaboration like in terms of getting to the performance stage?
Do you want me to start, or do you want to start?
Yeah, who's this a question for? Is this for Olivia?
I feel it's kind of both, but
I can start, and then
yeah.
you know, and I don't mind giving away all the insights to the pre-concert talk audience, because you guys came, you guys showed up.
That's true.
That's
Get
fair.
the extra insights into this. The people who didn't come, they have to figure out like what's going on. Is this good music or not? Am I supposed to... Yeah, the Zikalasha score is written for 12 First Nations and Native American and Mestizo women. That was all done. It was all written for living colleagues and friends and heroes. But it was, I was able to talk with all of them and tell them, have conversations with them, and that was the source and the inspiration for the scores. I mean, I was already interested in the music they were making, but I was interested also in their biography, their philosophy of music, their tribal ways. Also, those were important to me, and all of this went into composing the scores.
Yeah, because we met in person first. I remember us having coffee and you kind of presenting this work that you were starting, that you'd already done some of them, but you were still kind of building it out. And then it was 2020, so we ended up chatting online. But yeah, it was just a lot of conversations. And then eventually I remember you being like, oh, this is taking a while for me to find it exactly. And then you suddenly had a score and it was like, oh yeah, that's definitely it. Like, I don't know. It just all sort of came together. I guess I'll follow suit in what Raven's saying. I'll tell you what I'm doing. How's that? Do you want to know? Yeah. Okay. So, my score, there's about 11 arrows and I turn, and maybe it'll be one of you, but I am creating improvisations based off of various people that I'll see in the audience, as well as some of the performers who will be behind me.
And you're
So,
standing in the middle of the audience.
yeah, so for that one, I'm on stage, but I'm going to be pulling from some of the audience and then some of the performers behind me. Yeah, kind of like some of we've done this a few times, and I have had performances where I've been right in the middle of the audience and I've only had audience members, and then sometimes staging hasn't always allowed for me to be directly in the middle. So then sometimes we, my colleagues and friends offer themselves up as improvisation material. And so, yeah, there may be some of you who will have an improv based off of what I'm seeing or feeling or getting in the few seconds I'm kind of analyzing you.
Yeah, it's analyzing,
Yeah.
I guess, but it's also like reciprocal. I think it's
Yes.
like a listening and speaking to each other without words, and just being in the presence of each other.
I think it's also a way to guarantee an audience. You should have said with at least 100, people around you. I love it says for at least 11 with at least 11 audience members around you. But anyway, I like that detail now because didn't know why that was there. So that's
Yeah, if you do it in the middle of the audience and people are too shy sitting below you to turn around, then you're just looking at the back of their heads. You can't read that much from their back of their heads. Yeah, all right. That's cool. We'll do this, Birushi.
You mentioned the other day something that I wanted to ask you to tell people just a little bit about is your work with NACAP, the Native American Composers Apprenticeship Program, which takes place at the Grand Canyon, right? And tonight you have a colleague, Michael Begay, who's from that as well. But let's this is the home of the string quartet, and you've written 2 major quartets. So tell us a little about how that got started.
Yeah, it's a project called the Native American Composer Apprentice Project. I've been teaching this program since 2004. One of the very first students of this program is a composer, Michael Begay. He's sitting right here in the audience. He's also from the Navajo Nation. Around 2006, 2008, he started teaching it with me. And we just we work with high schools all over the Navajo Reservation, also the Hopi Reservation, and also Salt River Pima, which is in the homelands where Scottsdale, Arizona is now. And we drive to these different schools and teach kids to write string quartets. Now, the thing is, about half these schools, the students know how to read music. So the reason why is that they have a music teacher in those schools is because they have a really good basketball team or football team. So they need a pep band, right? So then somebody decides, oh, we need a music teacher. So because we have a good team this year, so we need a band. And so those kids already know how to read music. The other kids, they don't know anything about the staff or F sharp minor or any of these things. So Mike and I usually have about a week. And if a student only learns middle C and whole note, well, they're going to write a piece for middle C and whole note. But that's some of the best music anyway, because we show them, you know, vibrato, glissandos, sul ponticello, sul tasto, bend the note, all these bowing techniques, ricochet, spiccato. And so if it's just a droning note, whole note on one pitch, it's going to still sound like 21st century music, especially because no music like this has come out of the Navajo Nation just in the 21st century. There was not access for a string quartet to come out and do this. So this was a project. This didn't start with myself. It was a project of the Grand Canyon Music Festival, who'd been putting on concerts since the 80s at the Grand Canyon of chamber music, but luckily thought to have some educational component in that community where the people have lived for, you know, a very long time. And so that's where Mike and I have been able to develop our teaching.
No, this is also wonderful to hear about. And I'm wondering if we might have a little bit of time to take some questions from the audience. If anybody has a question, please wait for a microphone to come to you so that we're able to capture. I've already got 3 people. This is great. So just wait. We'll get to you, I'm sure.
Raven, I have a couple of questions for you. One is, like, when did you first decide or discover that you were a musician? I was kind of curious about how that evolved. And I know that Kokopelli has a flute, so I was a little surprised when you said that flutes are not part of, you know, DNA or...
Kokopelli's not from
Oh, I see. He's from Anasazi, no?
I guess, but that's not, yeah.
I
That's
see.
our ancestors, but yeah, that we don't really have.
Oh, okay,
I
okay.
mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but yeah, we don't really do that kind of thing, you know? Yeah,
It's
there's
fine.
a whole new age dream that's emerged out of the Southwest that we have nothing to do with, you know? There's a lot of friends and relatives and practitioners who play, have a flute practice, but it doesn't have a lot to do with traditional Navajo music.
I see. So are you familiar with Smithsonian? It did some recordings in, I think, 1933, 1940, and came out something called Navajo Songs. And I've heard it. I was just curious whether you'd come across that and what the link with your own tradition was.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can talk about my own link with Navajo music is my Che, my grandfather. He was singing Navajo music all the time. He was singing all these songs, old songs. And my exposure to that would be, yeah, he's just sitting in front of the TV on the couch singing all the time. And I have no idea if these are old traditional songs or songs he made up on the spot. So this is my entry into both traditional Navajo music and improvisation, is him singing. And to this day, I don't know which are ones that are a world premiere or a very old thing. My own musical education, the family moved to Albuquerque when I was about 9 years old or so, and I had the opportunity to take piano lessons, and that's where I learned to read music. And I didn't stick with piano too long. I did it for about 3 years, but I was fascinated by the notation, you know, music notation. For me, it was this grid that opened up the language of understanding all these classical instruments, you know, all the way down on the bass clef. Okay, that's where the contrabass or the contrabassoon is, but you know, and further up the piccolo. So it's all laid out there, and it's like a spectrum of notes, you know, and that to me it all made sense from that point on.
I love that you've brought teaching, learning, the love of music to the schools. It's something that is disappearing across the country, and it's wonderful that you've reintroduced. My question is for the children that you have helped teach and inspire. Are they performing also at these concerts? Are you giving them that experience as well?
Yeah, if they're good, yeah.
Of their own pieces?
Yeah. Oh, you're saying for the whole program. I thought you meant ongoing. Sorry.
No.
Yes, the Grand Canyon, the month long, well, the several week long instructions culminates in a concert at the Grand Canyon, Music Festival, where we present the pieces every year. And so the students, they've written by that time like a 3-minute string quartet. We have students who do it every year too, as long as they're in high school, and some even past the time they're in high school. And they also have an opportunity to get up on stage and talk about the work that they've made. And so to date, I mean, I haven't taught it in a few years. Michael's taking it over in a lot of ways. And we also have other former students, composer Sage Bond, also from Navajo Nation, who's teaching it now as well. And there was another Russell Goodluck, another alumni. So it's ongoing. It's cumulative. It's continuing with the students now being the teachers, and we've probably resulted in 300, 400 compositions come out of this, and all of it gets recorded. And I mean, I think this is a lifelong project, and hopefully Mike can we can figure this out. But yeah, to make this archive of the scores and the recordings.
Have any of the students gone on past their time in school professionally? Have you sparked that kind of ongoingness in their musical careers?
I don't encourage young people to go into music as a profession. I'm joking. I'm kidding. Michael here is at Peabody, up the road, and Sage Bond also. Like I said, a lot of these students have gone on to work professionally, nationally, internationally, and others don't. They, it was part of their education, and they've gone on to become working in medicine, working in their own tribal communities and in governance. There's been others who've gone on to become teachers of other subjects, but importantly, and I was joking, but maybe not joking. Like I think the role of any teacher is to identify those strengths and be like, this is a fun thing you get to do. It gets you to think about the universe, gets you to think about the world. Maybe you want to make a political piece through a string quartet and show it at the Grand Canyon. Let's do it. That's yeah.
Hi.
So that's what the program, I hope, at the end of the day is for these young people.
Hello in the corner. Hi. Other than the 11 arrows, what other pages are you going to be using tonight of the Shikala Shaw?
Did you have a question?
That's what other pages other than the 11 arrows are you going to be using? Are you going to be playing from? She mentioned the 111 arrows page, right? There's 12 pages.
There's 11 arrows in the Olivia Shortt score. So the 11 arrows represent these 11 positions as she's pivoting clockwise, or is it clockwise, counterclockwise? Clockwise, or across the audience. So those 11 positions are just in that one score, but there's 12 scores total. And I think we have, how many is the College Shell scores out of the 6, 5?
5 or 6. Yeah.
Yeah, 5 or 6 of those. Yeah.
Will we be able to tell, like you're up on your website, will we be able to guess which ones you're playing from?
I don't, that's a good question, because I think the program was needed to be printed before we figured out an order of these. We could tell you right now the set list.
Yeah, I mean, so the program is, we've listed all the pieces we're performing with the instrumentation. They're just not in the order we'll perform them, but because the instrumentation is so varied, it should be very easy to figure out which piece we're doing when.
Yeah. I mean, we could tell you right now, probably, what's the first one that does?
We are starting with for Cheryl, Lihuradel.
Yeah.
Then we move to Whisper Trio. Then help me.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, then we do Quiver. Then we do for Carmina Escobar.
That one's for screaming as quietly as possible.
Yes.
There's one exception here. There's the piece for Cheryl Larondel. That's for a singer to sing these notes in the form of advice in pitch darkness. They're gonna do this with two performers singing through their saxophones or through their horns. So that one you might not be able to tell from the instructions. The one for Suzanne Kite, Dave is going to do that with what do you got, like a harmonium or something?
With a synthesizer, yeah.
A foot pedal synth.
And he's using foot pedals to play the synthesizer.
And I think the others are listed. You'd be able to figure it out from the other ones. There's one called Whisper Trio. They're whispering. There's 3 people on stage. Yeah. Thank you for knowing the work.
Maybe this is an unanswerable question or an unanswerable multi-part question, but it seems to me that the 2 composers here are coming from a different tradition than Raven Chacon. And how did you get connected? And also, as I've listened to this very enlightening discussion, a great deal has been placed on the importance of collaboration and improvisation, but for each person, it has to come also, not instead of, but also from individual ideas that were there before the collaboration and the improvisation began. So I'm wondering, what traditions did each of you come from? And what was the cultural, not a disconnect, but the cultural surprise when Raven was combining what he learned in Western tradition and Western music with what he was hearing from his elders in the Navajo tradition? This is an amazing set of different influences that are coming together in what I take to be a spectacular weaving. And I wanted to hear a bit about that.
Sure. I'll start because I have a pretty clear. So my mother's family is Irish. They came from Southern Ireland to Toronto, and so they immigrated there. My father's side is Anishinaabe, so I'm a member of Nipissing First Nation. So I very much have a mixed, I don't know, perspectives on life, like everyone in this room, to be honest. But there's many things I'm also like reconnecting with traditionally, and I studied classical music, but then I also like go hang out at the Native Canadian Center, and like I'm learning Anishinaabe and trying to become a fluent speaker of my father's language. So it's like, I don't know, I feel like we're each very diverse people, and like we just are. I think we also just have a lot of shared values. I think that's the thing that's been that I could see like as a through line, if you like really got to know us, is that we all care a lot about our collaborations. We care about what we're presenting and how we're trying to present it, and that there's intention behind everything we do, right? Like I love storytelling. That's a huge thing for me, is like, how can I tell stories in like weird abstract ways that also feel really true to my values? So that's just kind of my take on this question. Thank you for asking. I'll pass it to one of you two.
Yeah, totally. So I'm kind of here as the representative of thingNY, but we're a group of composer performers. We're a collective, and there are kind of 8 of us at this point, but only some of us are part of this concert. And we invited Olivia to join us for this concert because we'd wanted to collaborate with them, and also because we knew that they had worked with Raven, and it just seemed like a great excuse to spend more time together. But I feel like part of what is fun about thingNY is that we are a new music collective that came together in the contemporary classical world, but we have all come from many different kinds of traditions. We've all trained in many different genres, and I think one of the hallmarks of what we're interested in is not needing to be in one kind of tradition or one kind of way of working. Yeah.
Wonderful. I think that you are in for a remarkable evening in so many ways, and I wanted to thank the artists and particularly Raven. I admired his music so much, and so much of what he does you can find online and learn a lot more about it. The most recent thing he's done is one of the most many recent things is the Edinburgh Festival I See Red, which was a fascinating lineup of artists who are expressing rage about the state of the world, among other things. But the phrase that I took away from reading about it was together they express anger for horrors and reflect on ancestral traumas while also seeking hope and connection to the experience of collective listening. And I think that's what we are excited to present tonight is the opportunity for an experience like this. So thank you so much for bringing this music.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. Thank you, David. Thank you, Carol. Yeah, thank you all for coming.